Okay guys, well, it's the big day. Cab, I think, is finally going to go on here in a couple hours. So I'll show you a little bit about what I worked on yesterday and what I came up with, in my part scavenging for the week, and where it sits right now. So I've got the cab all set, ready. Got the painted surfaces taped off with masking tape. We're going to put these t-shirts on, sandwich those underneath the straps too, and put them up on the forks of the skid steer. Skid steer sitting across the street, ready to go. I gotta get that unloaded yet and warmed up, but regardless. So the cab's ready. I did have to drill my holes for where those forward cab mount bolts go, and I widened those holes out too. Take it back up there. So, and then I took the, once I hole sawed out those front holes, made some plugs, so it'll look half decent going back in. Let's see, parts wise, what do we get this week? We got airline for the crap out of here. Airline for the air horns, and I actually found this valve. It was out in the snow in my stash of parts outside the barn. So anyway, got all my fittings for push to connect for that. So that's ready to go. What else did we do? Oh, this was the big one. Look at what is on the ground. Yeah. The slip yoke off the back of the trans. My idea of using the jack, I decided wasn't going to work, so I picked up this. I could not afford the $275 Tiger tool, so I got the $100 OEM tool instead, and it worked perfect. I will say that the hose cups were on there. You can see there's actually still one left that's seized onto that joint. It's not all the way out. I wouldn't be surprised if those were the original U-joints from 1971. I mean, the truck only had low 200,000s on it, so it wasn't a high mile truck. I had to put all the pressure that a 1-inch gun could put on that, and then go back up top with acetylene torches and heat each, you can see where I heated here. Had to heat a lot around single balance. Probably not. Oh, balance. There we go. Around on the yoke, around that cup. I mean, I had to get that cherry, and then every time with pressure, I could hear it going pop, 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 and barely moving. Then I go back down, put pressure on the tool again, come back up, heat, and then eventually could push all four out. So I'm hoping I can actually reuse this slip yoke. I don't know what the drive shaft shop is going to say. I haven't measured it lately, but it's somewhere around like 74 or 75 inches, I think, is that shaft. So I know they're going to balk at it and not want to do a single piece shaft, but I don't have a good place to put a carrier bearing. There's no cross member currently in a good spot, so I'm really hoping I can talk them into just doing a single piece shaft, but we'll see. So on the truck, I got the last of my airline fittings, so the cab's ready to, all the push connects are good to go. I've got my port here ready for the airline once the cab's on. I got my shifter airline kit, my Eaton Fuller kit, finally. So that's all buttoned up on the trans side. I don't have it done up here yet because the ports on the, if you can see, the ports on the bottom of that splitter are 1/8 inch thread, which you would expect, right? Problem is, 2 out of the 4 fittings that came from Eaton Fuller are what I assume is 16th. So I need bushings. They're going to take me from 1/8 like that to 16th like that, which is what the ports on the. So anyway, 2 of the fittings were 90s and already had, push to connect on one side for the 5/32 airline, and then 1/8 thread on the other. So I use those on the trans, obviously, because they're going to be hard to get to. They actually needed 90s on those 2, and the straights are clearly for the splitter. So anyway, it'll be inside the cab. It's completely accessible, but I got to do some digging on the internet and see what I can find for bushings there. But anyway, so shifter airlines are good to go. We got some convoluted tubing on to protect them. Got these airlines coming from the tank supplies, all buttoned down. Airlines are on, going back to the axle. Everything's tucked and zip tied, and got 4 lines sticking up there ready to push onto the cab fitting. So I I mean, basically this thing is, oh, and I got my, this is my, this mud flap has given me so much over the years. This was at one time on my my Cummins 3500 HD. I saved it just because it's one of those super thick, super dense mud flaps. So it is what the engine mounts are sandwiched onto, between the mounts and the, you know, frame side and motor side. There we've got some sandwiched in right there on the tail shaft mount, and then same thing obviously up front on the front mount. So that's my isolators there. They're going to be my isolators on the rear cab mount too, because I kind of had to, you know, I'm kind of combining two different cab mount styles, so it's kind of unique. So anyway, that's my isolator. Gonna work great. I actually have the originals up here, 2 sets of the originals for the front. So anyway, that's where we stand. I'm gonna get the last couple things ready to go, and get skid steer fired up and Cummins truck moved and make some room in the driveway, and we'll see how pissed off my wife and I can get at each other when I have her run the skid steer. It'll be fun. Alright guys, so the cab is set on. I'm not going to show you the cab just yet because it's not perfect. I'll show you, give you a shot of some video of it once it looks good. But the problem I've got, it's back in the barn. So I've got it jacked up on a floor jack over here, holding the passenger side of the cab up. I don't know if you can see if it makes sense, but that opening right there, where's my finger? That opening right there is the doghouse opening as viewed from the bottom. So it's a tight squeeze. It was in the Loadstar, but the problem we have is that the Loadstar, these cab mounts, right? They sit like, I'm guessing around 4 inches, whatever, 4 to 6 inches lower on a Loadstar than they do on a Fleetstar. The Fleetstar intentionally was jacked up to get it to clear larger engines like this with such a short hood on it. Well, I can't jack it up. I can't change it because I wouldn't be able to use the butterfly hood from the Loadstar. You know, nothing would line up with the grill anymore, and that was the whole point of this whole project. So we're sticking with this. We've come this far. This is what's happening. Otherwise, I would have just built thrown the Fleetstar cab on here, and, you know, use the tilt hood, and it would have been a whole lot simpler. But, you know, simple isn't as interesting. So it looks to me though that everything clears. I mean, transmission I think is gonna clear barely, maybe. I mean, I may have to jack it up ever so slightly, like 1/2 inch to 1 inch with some spacers, but I think everything works except for that thing right there. That is the tachometer drive. And it just does not fit. And it's in a bad spot to try to, you know, I'm not gonna cut a hole in the floor to clear it. It doesn't make any sense. And the problem is, I actually currently, the tachometer drive cable is broke from the Fleetstar. So it's not going to be usable anyway. Knowing a Detroit diesel, I'm guessing that I can get a tachometer drive from some other point. I could be wrong on that, and at the end of the day, if I don't have a tack, I'll survive. So we're going to try taking this off, seeing what I got to do to block this plate off, and then see if I can jack this thing down and see what we come up with. So I'll show you once we're wrapped up. Okay, well, as you can see behind me, that looks like a cab on those frame rails. I didn't take any video of the process because my wife was running the skid steer and she's not exactly an operator, and I was running around making sure stuff was trying to line up and not scrape paint, and, you know, cables and shifters and everything else, you know, stayed running where it belongs. And it was snowing all day. Anyway, it just was not, I also don't own a tripod, so there was no way to prop it up and have it look like something. So anyway, you can see the finished product. I got it on and I found out that my fears were correct, and that, long story short, Fleetstar's, the cab sat, from the looks of it, probably about 4 inches, maybe 5, higher than the Loadstar cab. And all it was offsets on the cab mounts. The front cab mounts were a little taller, on the back just a little bit different style. So they just did a body lift essentially on the cab off of a standard 34-inch set of frame rails, and And then obviously, you know, the tilt hood on the front sat where it sat. That's an easy mount, you know, because all you're mounting is the hinge in the front. So I found out it was an issue. The cab sat down, but it hit on the tachometer drive. So that's gone. You'll see I'll splice in some a little picture, and I think I did a quick video of it. But regardless, I took that off, got rid of it, made a block off plate and a gasket, and put that back on. Solved that, but then there was some framework for the doghouse that was hitting on the bell housing. So I should have taken the cab back off, but in my haste, I didn't, and I decided to try to torch it off because that's the best thing that could reach. And that was a really bad idea. So anyway, I melted a little bit of my floor. We're gonna fix it. It's not a big deal. It'll probably be 30 minutes worth of work to get it fixed, so not the end of the world, but regardless, it sucks. Anyway, I got that done and then realized I was still gonna have problems. So right now I've got some 1x4 cut down, and I've got wood sandwiched in to give it a slight body lift, you know, about a 3/4 of an inch to an inch body lift. So it's sitting where it needs to sit. The mount bolts are in. I don't have them tightened down yet because I may have to lift it back up to get some lines hooked up once they come in. But regardless, I'll show you what we got. It'll be real hard to see inside this tiny barn, but cab is mounted. It looks freaking awesome. You can stand back a little bit more towards the back. Everything's sitting nice and level where it should. I love how it sits above that fuel tank. It's like the perfect height. You can see that, since to my knowledge this is the first time ever, not that this is a major momentous, you know, worldwide occasion, but I think this is the first time a Loadstar has ever had a 671 underneath it, ever. So I guess that's this truck's claim to fame. But it is tight, very tight. I mean, it was tight in the Fleet Star, but this is real tight. Overhead clearance is fine. It's clearance around that doghouse, and then around on this side, the air intake horn and my exhaust. Luckily, I did my exhaust right. It's hard to see in there, but it fits. It's perfect. A couple scratches. Cab came down. We got some scratches there. We'll throw some Alpine green back on it, and then there's some scratches on the right there on the cowl or the firewall from my Hesta secondary fuel filter assembly. But you know, everything else works. I already hooked up the link. You can't see, it's too freaking dark in there, but I already hooked up the linkage for there it is, for the throttle, and the clutch linkage is hooked up here. Well, it's not hooked all the way up, but first set's hooked up. Sandwiches around the frame rail like it should. You know, all the lines are perfect. They'll reach right where they need to reach. So you know, overall I'm pretty pleased. It was a pain in the butt to get here and to get this thing set on, but it's on. Wish I could stand back about 10 more feet to show you. So now you get to see. So literally, better than half of this engine is inside the cab when it comes down to it. And you can see just how tight it is right there on the exhaust manifold, or the downpipe, I guess, if you will, and just how tight it is on the doghouse around that back gear drive. So it is literally shooting. You can see my melted floor. We won't talk about that. But anyway, actually I lied. I don't have the bolts in the back. My bolts aren't long enough because of my spacers, so I gotta get longer bolts. So I've got screwdrivers in there now just to keep everything located. But you know, shifter locates perfect in that hole. Actually, I think I've got it in gear. Yeah, there's neutral. So you can see that the forward angle they put on it so that it, you know, because it's so far back in this short little cab. So she is shoehorned in there, but she's in. And this truck is finally kind of a truck again. It's not just a set of frame rails. So I'll do a little more tidying up on this thing, get some stuff hooked up and mocked up, and work on some more tomorrow. But we finally crossed that big goal of cross the threshold of getting the cab back on, so hopefully never to come off again.